Member Services Director for BOMA San Francisco, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our Public Safety Forum, which is a co-hosted event by BOMA's Emergency Preparedness Committee, some of you know that as EPC, and also our Government Affairs Policy Advisory Committee, which is also known as GAPAC. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our webinar sponsor, Paramount Group Incorporated. And I'm going to turn the screen over to Paramount Group's Christine Mann to say a few words. Christine?
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tori. And so I just wanted to say, as president of BOMA San Francisco, and on behalf of our organization, I would like to thank the leaders of the San Francisco Police Department, the Department of Emergency Management, and the Department of Public Works for the work that you do to make the city a better place. We know that your jobs are challenging, and especially during these challenging times, we appreciate the work that you and your teams do every day. So BOMA San Francisco has had a long-standing partnership and relationship with each of your departments, and we want to continue to be that resource for you to make San Francisco as good as it can be. So thank you again for being here and sharing your thoughts for today's forum.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you again for Paramount's sponsorship. So joining us today are San Francisco Police Department Chief Bill Scott, going to be joining us, hopefully, is Executive Director of the Department of Emergency Management, Mary Ellen Carroll. And on screen with us, additionally, is the Department of Public Works Director, Alaric. Degrafinried. That's a tough one, and we're going to have you keep on saying it for us. They will be discussing various topics regarding public safety, matters including the public health pandemic, the conditions of our street, including vandalism and other misbehavior, street cleaning, and more. To our attendees, we will be utilizing the Q&A feature. So please, as your questions come up, post them to the Q&A section, and we will pose those to our panelists following their presentations or as time permits. So at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to our co-moderators, Bonnie Kobrowski, Seagate Properties, Chair of the Emergency Preparedness Committee, and Shana Eskew with Allhouse Deaton, Chair of the Government Affairs Policy Advisory Committee. Ladies?
Great. Tori, thank you very much. I appreciate the intro. And I want to take this time to introduce and welcome Chief Bill Scott. And really to reiterate what Christine mentioned, I also want to thank the entire police department. As Christine said, she kind of took the words out of my mouth. You know, there have been some very, very challenging times these past few months, and certainly these past few weeks. And, you know, just thank you to the entire department. Also reiterate a thank you for your department and you partnering with BOMA and specifically with the emergency committee. When we meet, whether it was every month, every other month, there's always a police department representative there. And your participation, Chief, at last year's annual seminar was just not only so welcome, but really fabulous and really appreciated by everybody who attended. So thank you, thank you. For those who don't know, Chief Scott has been in the San Francisco area with us since 2017, so a little over 3.5 years. He previously spent over 27 years with the Los Angeles Los Angeles Police Department. Sorry about that. And I'm not going to take away any other thunder, so I'll turn it over to the Chief now for his words and presentation.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So thank you for that warm introduction. Can you all hear me? I have a bit of an echo here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So as was said, I want to start with just number one, let me thank you for having me here. And secondly, thank you for your support always. You all, I mean, this group has been very supportive and a great partner with the police department, and a lot of what we're seeing in throughout the country with the civil unrest and the damage and the vandalism and the violence and the protests and the anger. If we can have more relationships like we have with you all, I think a lot of the problems can be solved before they become problems. So I really appreciate the partnership. So I'll give an overall, like a 2-minute overview of how the last couple months have played out for the San Francisco Police Department, starting with February, when Mayor Breed announced in late February that the city was, she declared a public health emergency due to COVID. Now, at that time, I think a lot of people were shocked. She was the first mayor in the country to do that. And it took some criticism, to be quite frank with you. I know a lot of what I read in the various media, newspapers, and saw in the news, people were critical of that decision. But I must say, in terms of raising the level of the awareness, getting our city ready for what was to come, I applaud her move. I think it was a brilliant move and a bold and courageous move. And really, for the police department, it put us in the right frame of mind to be in position to really thrive through a lot of crazy times that we've seen in this past couple of months. And what I mean by that specifically is our city, we started really stepping up through Director Carroll, who you'll hear from shortly, through her leadership. Our Emergency Operations Center started to materialize actually in early February. Director Carroll started putting the pieces together, kind of anticipating, based on the advice that she was receiving from our public health officials and our health director, that we were going to be in for hard times with this virus, that there was no vaccination for. So we had already started to gear up. So in late February, when Mayor Breed declared a public health emergency, it really raised the level of awareness and for the police department, the level of preventive measures. We are fortunate enough to have an in-house MD on our staff. So we have a doctor actually that helps us vet through all these medical type issues as it relates to the safety and health and the welfare of our officers. And our doctor, Dr. Richard Martin, started right away with just the basic messaging of this virus is out there. It's a very dangerous virus. It's a very alarming situation because there's no vaccination. So just the basic things of washing your hands, using hand sanitizer, keeping distance. We started messaging in late January, actually, to our officers about the virus and the need to wash your hands frequently. And that messaging increased as we started to see this become more and more of a problem, both worldwide and in our country. And I think the end result of our city and our police department getting in front of that is we've had to date very few cases of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the police department. We've only had 5. On the contrary, unfortunately, there have been departments across the country, New York, Detroit, that have not only had triple digits in some cases, confirmed cases, they've had a lot of deaths. Officers have died from this virus. So we're very fortunate that our city got in front of it. We're very fortunate that we had the right people making the right decisions, and our police force got through this, at least up to this point. And we still have a long way to go because the virus is still out there and there's still no vaccination. But so far we fare very well. We've had about 130 or so officers that have had some type of exposure that had risen to the level where they had to be quarantined and they were off work. And that's been a very good strategy as well. The city stepped up and through the hotel council in cooperation with the various hotel groups, the city provided rooms for our first responders so they didn't have to expose, if they chose to do so, they didn't have to expose their families to the virus. And that was a step that was very helpful as well. So in terms of the virus itself, we fared very well. So on March 16th, when the health order, the shelter-in-place order went into effect, effective midnight, March 17th, we tried to get in front of that as well. Our department publicly was on the news that night, and what we told the residents of San Francisco is at 12:01 midnight, we were gonna be out in force contacting businesses who should be closed to educate, to give them the proper advice and warning that they had to close. And that did start at 12:01 midnight. So we went around the city particularly the restaurants and the nightclubs and the bars that is where we were concerned, because we had seen in other cities that was a source of spread of the virus. So we were very in front of that, very aggressive in terms of our educational campaign. And really our philosophy with the COVID situation was we always we wanted to start with education. Then that escalated, if we had to a warning. We put systems and protocols in place where when a person was formally warned, we took an incident report. And if we had to go back and warn again, then that's when we cited. To date, we've only had to cite 25 times, and that's a combination of businesses and individuals for violation of the public health order. And I think by and large, our strategy on how we were going to do what we did was very effective. The mayor did, for a while, daily press conferences through the week, and then that eventually went to 3 times a week, and now we do them as needed. But really the purpose of my role in there was to educate the public, because we knew going into this that in order to be successful, we had to have voluntary compliance. And we wanted to use, and we did use, enforcement citations as a last resort. We understand how this has impacted our city. People's livelihoods are at risk. People who are day in and day out law-abiding people were now faced with a situation that if they defied the health order and tried to open their businesses, now they're subject to criminal and possibly civil fines. So that's a very difficult situation for people. So we deliberately were very thoughtful in how we used enforcement as a last resort, understanding the anxiety and the pressure that many of us face right now. By and large, our city has done better than most cities. I think to date we've had 47 or so deaths. Our hospitalization rate never spiked like what we thought it might. The spread has been largely kept under wraps. We flattened the curve quicker than almost any major city in the United States. So I think we have a lot to be proud of about how we pulled together as a city. And I'm talking about the civic leaders, the mayor, all the departments that had a piece of this, and the residents of San Francisco who complied, which was the key to our being successful up to this point. So in the midst of COVID, we had toward the middle of May, there started to be, actually toward the end of April and going into May, we started to see protests across the country about people really upset and tired of being cooped up in their homes. We had First Amendment groups, we had religious groups, we had gun lobbyists. I mean, you name it, there were protests across the country. Trucking organizations, there were a lot of protests. So going into May, we started to see a higher level of anxiety just based on COVID. Fast forward to the end of May, early June is when the Minneapolis George Floyd unfortunate and tragic death occurred at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department and police officers. And that really was, in my opinion, kind of the straw, the proverbial straw that broke the back of the camel. Before we started to have problems in our city, we started to see problems elsewhere throughout the country. The epicenter was Minneapolis, which started out many protests as peaceful. They quickly turned violent. And as we all saw unfold in front of our eyes on the news, worldwide news, the city erupted in flames, and buildings and businesses were looted and burned down. Police stations burned down. People were injured, seriously injured. Officers were injured and attacked. It just was not a good situation. And that spread across the country. At the height of it, almost every major city in this country had some form of violence, violent protests. So it was widespread and far-reaching. In our city, we were fairly peaceful up until Saturday, not this past Saturday, but Saturday a week ago. And on that Saturday, we had protests across the city, large protests. And what we saw, the pattern that we saw in other parts of the city before we actually saw it unfold in front of our eyes in San Francisco, was protests were largely peaceful for the most part. There were some cities where they started out violent, but largely peaceful. As the day progressed, they became increasingly more hostile and increasingly more violent. By nightfall, in many cities, the protests were absolutely out of control, violent, looting, setting of fires, tearing down businesses, attacking police officers, burning police cars and other vehicles, attacking police stations. And we saw this in many cities across the country. And we did not want to see that in San Francisco. So Saturday, when the protests started to increasingly become more hostile and more violent, that's exactly what unfolded here. The mid-market area, downtown, shopping district, Union Square, Westfield Mall, all were subject to the same things that we saw in other cities. Looters started to hit, and quite frankly, it was overwhelming for us. I mean, everything kind of happened at once. And even though we were deployed, we had officers at the Westfield Mall posted around the mall, but we didn't have enough officers there to stop what eventually happened with looters overtaking one of the entrance points, getting in the mall, lighting fires, and just looting. So that actually really drained a lot of our resources. So in the midst of that happening, looters started to hit the Union Square, a lot of the high-end stores and other stores in Union Square at the same time. And it was, quite frankly, it was overwhelming. You know, we did everything we could. Our first priority was to protect life, to keep people from dying. And
Absolutely.
so that culminated in a lot of damage, a lot of property loss on Saturday night, but we did achieve one objective. Nobody died, including none of our officers seriously injured, although we did have 2 officers injured. One when some type of hard object was thrown at her. She was hit in the head. Fortunately, she had on her personal protective equipment, and her helmet prevented serious injury. Another officer who had some type of caustic chemical sprayed in his face and eyes, and he did not endure any serious injuries either. We had many occasions.
All good news, Chief. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I don't want to cut you short because I know we could all listen to you for a very long, enjoyable time. But I do want to allow our other speaker, Alaric, from the GPW to speak. And then I also do want to allow time at the end for questions. I know we've gotten a few in. And so if you don't mind, let me throw it over to Dana for right now, give you a breather for a moment, and then we'll start back if that's okay with you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, Chief Scott. We really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are. So we will hold out hope that Ms. Carroll will be able to join us, but for now we're going to move to Alaric Degrafinried. Hopefully I said that properly. Alaric was appointed the acting director of the San Francisco Public Works on January 28th of this year by the city administrator, Naomi Kelly. And he most recently served as the city purchaser and director of the San Francisco Office of Contract Administration. Welcome, Director Degrafinried, and please let us know your thoughts.
Hey, hi. I just want to say thank you all for welcoming here today. I'll be quick just because I do want to make sure we have time to get to the part of the presentation to answer questions and things like that. I prepared a short as a presentation to kind of talk about some of the work that as we've been doing here at Infra Public Works the last in the several months. I'm going to focus my presentation mostly on kind of what and we've been doing during the period for COVID. You know, but I guess to kind of give you an idea of my background, I guess, like you said before, I came on board at the end of January, was dealing with some changes here at the department, followed and soon thereafter by as a global as a pandemic, which changed the way that we do our jobs a little bit. And then more recently with the civil unrest that we're also addressing. So if things have not been for normal, if you will, for us here at as a Public Works for the last for several months, but I would say that we continue to do great work, I think, for the city of in San Francisco. You know, some of the ways that Public Works has been supporting the city and the businesses and the residents of San Francisco is we've been, once we closed as a city, we went to shelter in place. As many of our unhoused neighbors, they were relying on the restrooms that were in the libraries and other in the public buildings, and for restrooms and things like that, and Public Works and stepped up, and we decided to expand at our pitch stop program. So now we have every 57 different locations, every 50 neighborhoods throughout the city, where we provide open public restrooms, as many of which are staffed 24/7. So those are restrooms. When I say staffed, that means we have someone there to attend to them each and every time that they're used, so they'll be clean and safe. We've also provided some assistance to help to establish the safe as and the sleeping sites. For example, we have one here in the City Hall area between the Asian Art Museum and the Public Library, where and the unhoused individuals can place their tents in a safe way, so they are for socially distanced, things like that. We've also provided some assistance as a Moscone Center, providing again a shelter and making sure that the residents that are there are safe and not going to be spreading the disease. So I think, as was mentioned before and by Chief Scott, I think the city has shown that how we were able to collaborate, whether it be with the police, with public health, with Public Works, and all the other in the city departments that were actively involved in this. This has been as a team effort that has allowed us to do this. And again, we have to certainly thank and appreciate the assistance we've gotten from and the residents and the businesses here as well. And we've also been working with some of our other departments here to close down certain of the muni stations, because those aren't going to be, or those aren't open right now during and the shelter in place. We've also provided some assistance to whether it be here in the Tenderloin. We had one in Mission, and we have a couple. We have one down at the port and one in Soma. But we've also played an active role in to set up several testing sites as across the city, to making sure that the residents of San Francisco can get tested ever frequently. I think our goal is to have approximately 1,600 tests as administered each day. And when I checked last week, I think we were getting close to, if not as exceeding that target. So that's really been the main thing that Public Works has been doing as it relates to COVID. On top of that, we are continuing to do our day-to-day responsibilities of the street sweeping and things like that. We have not at all and diminished in the services that as we're doing in that area. I say probably we've been doing more, because again, the overall and the sanitation of our streets and things like that are important to us. The mayor just announced, I believe it was this week, that we are going to be restarting the mechanical and the streets ever sweeping next week. That'll be great, because again, for the last few months, we have not been able to operate the sweepers on the curb, because all the cars have been parked there. So it's been very difficult for us to do that for the last several months, but we are going to be beginning that service again beginning next week. So we're looking forward to getting back to normal as it goes from that perspective, and giving the people of San Francisco the clean streets and sidewalks that they expect and deserve. And that's it for me.
Shana, you're still muted.
Thank you, Director Degrafinried. Thank you, Bonnie. So I am told that Ms. Carroll has now joined us. So we're going to circle back and bring her into the discussion. Mary Ellen Carroll is the Executive Director of the Department of Emergency Management. She oversees a department of 280 employees who are responsible for leading San Francisco in planning, preparedness, communications, response, and recovery for daily emergencies, large citywide events, and major disasters. Her responsibilities include the overall operations of San Francisco's 911 Center, Emergency Operations Center, and the city's emergency public alert and warning systems. Thank you, Executive Director Carroll, and please feel free to go ahead. She appears, there we are.
Hi. Can you, all right, I'm trying to get this going. Hi, I am in my office, in my car.
Fantastic.
I'm pulled over. Yeah, sorry. We're in emergency mode around here. Hi, everyone. And sorry, this, as I was saying last night, if it doesn't get on my calendar, it sort of doesn't exist. So anyway, happy to be here. I know there were some specific questions for me, and so I don't know if you want, I'm not quite sure what the format is, if you want me to give sort of an overview of what's going, that could take several hours, or if you have some specific questions or areas that you want me to address.
Well, if you'd like to give a high-level overview now, I know we do have specific questions, so maybe just take a couple of moments to do that, and then I know Bonnie has some specific questions as well as my other attendees. Sure.
So, so first of all, I'm the director of the Department of Emergency Management, and I'm in my work vehicle with my bike in the background, as you can see. I get around the city on my bike once I get in. I'm heading to City Hall right now. We have been activated in the Emergency Operations Center actually since January, but we've been at Moscone, I believe the date's March 16th. We moved into Moscone in order to be able to work together and in a safe environment where we could all practice social distancing, but continue to do the work of the city and respond. So we are there with the Department of Public Health, the Human Services Agency, Department of Homelessness and Housing and Supported Housing, along with our IT department and our human resources. We're about 400 to 500 people strong on a daily basis. We have been coming to work every day since this started. I'm very grateful to add that we are very strict about our social distancing and our health mitigations, and knock on the car that we have had actually we've had no one get sick and no confirmed cases of COVID, in spite of the fact that we come every day to work together. We've activated our disaster service workers, so while those departments are the primary ones, we have people working every day from every city department that you can imagine. Obviously, the public health charge hopefully is fairly clear, which is to understand, prevent, and mitigate and promote the health of San Franciscans. We also, through our operations, have done, we have a massive housing unit, which most likely you're aware of, and I know there's some questions about. We also have a very large feeding operation. Many people who were dependent on, were already food insecure before the pandemic. That situation was only exacerbated after. Many people depended on their meals, whether it was kids at school or seniors at senior centers. many people depend on congregate kind of meal programs to survive. And so obviously congregate meals are not something that are happening anymore. Kids are not in school. And so we've worked to deliver tens of thousands of meals to vulnerable folks. In addition, we had to expand that for people that were in isolation and quarantine, who either were in our isolation and quarantine hotels or were living at home but unable to go out, did not have support. And then furthermore, we've expanded our meals to folks that are living in the street. Around the homeless, and I know there were some questions about homeless, one of the things that happened over the last few months is that starting in early March, we were advised by public health to, in order to start thinning the population in our congregate homeless shelter settings, we stopped admitting people into shelters in early March. In addition, a lot of other programs halted, like Homeward Bound, which is a program that we support several people a day during normal times to help them facilitate to get home if they've gotten here and they have a place to go, halted. And so it really exacerbated what was already a crisis on our streets, which is in part why you see so many more tents in San Francisco right now. So, however, it was, CDC guidance and public health guidance was that the priority was really, and the biggest risk was in congregate settings. So we spent a lot of time up until now getting vulnerable folks out of congregate settings, out of hotel settings, and in some cases out of SRO settings into hotels, so that they could, they would not increase their chance really of surviving this. We're kind of at the tail end of that and starting to look at repurposing our congregate settings, determining what's going to be acceptable from a public health perspective about cohorting people and living together in a congregate setting. And in addition, working on a number of other initiatives like our safe sleep sites and our safe sleep villages, of which we have a few.
Mary Ellen?
Yes.
Mary Ellen, this is Bonnie from the Emergency Preparedness Committee. Great to see you again, and thank you so much for joining. I wonder if I could jump in for a moment on what you're talking about, and I'd also like to ask Chief Scott and Alaric as well to weigh in, if possible. Talking about, what happens, as you said, we're sort of getting to the tail end. What is going to happen with the tent cities that are around? We've had comments and questions from our BOMA members that some of them, quite frankly, are feeling a little uneasy on our downtown financial district city streets. We understand the logic of it. All the office workers, all the construction workers, all the techies, everyone's working from home. Huge homeless population has had to come out, and in some areas there are the tent cities, but how can our members feel safer walking down the city streets that they never thought about before? And I know it's a loaded question and a lot of different answers probably, but what's going to happen with this? Any ideas from any or all?
Well, I'll start, and I just saw Chief Scott. Hello, Chief. Glad you're here. We are, as I was just getting to that in my talking point.
Sorry.
So we are. So I do think it's important to understand how we got here and why. And I think I also just want to back up for a second, because I know how challenging this is for everyone, but we've got to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing work that has happened by everyone in really dodging a huge bullet and the lives that have been saved based on the actions of both our city leadership, our mayor, the Department of Public Health, and everyone else who, got through and is getting through shelter in place. And, we did not have to live through the horrific nightmare of New York and Italy and other cities that we saw. So, I do think that's important. That does not negate how difficult all of this is for everyone. So where we are now is we are gearing up to be able to, basically we're at like 20% capacity currently in our shelter system. So what's going to happen is we've got to have places for people to go. So we are in the process of determining what is going to be the appropriate programming, census, how we're going to be able to get people back into congregate shelters so that we can reopen our shelter system. In addition, we have opened several of these safe sleep sites, just these that are relatively small. We have 3 of them right now, and we're evaluating basically how we've never done anything like this before. It's a brand new model. We also need to, we're also facing, catastrophic economic impacts from this. So all of that has to be taken into account together. We are very focused on the Tenderloin, to be perfectly honest right now. That is a big focus for us. That neighborhood is the most impacted in the city and requires our attention. And so we are very focused and working quite hard to try to help alleviate some of the suffering that's going on in that neighborhood for everyone that lives there. And continuing to evaluate what our need is going to be for the duration of this emergency. So I apologize that I can't tell you like, oh, we're about to open 1,000 safe sleep sites and that's where everyone's going to go. We are looking at those options right now, and we have to do this hand in hand with the Department of Public Health, because we are still in a global pandemic. We are still in a very active public health emergency. And we have to do it from the economic perspective of what does the overall system look like? What are going to be the best choices and what can we afford to do? However, those types of decisions are going to be made very, very quickly so that we can then start implementing them and getting some relief to the people that are on the street and the businesses and the residents and everyone else who's around there.
Do you think with the hotels that are being used currently, do you think that that is potentially going to become a long-term solution?
We are looking at that. We certainly are looking at all solutions, including potentially, longer-term leasing or uses of those facilities. Yes.
Okay. And then, Chief, if I could ask you, I know you touched on it early in your welcome and presentation, but just to get down into the weeds a little bit, how are the patrols occurring down in the financial district, the South of Market district? Has that been maintained so that, again, our members can feel safe, our retailers, our tenants can feel safe? What's going on down there?
Yeah. So in the advent of the civil unrest issues, we actually increased our deployment significantly. We canceled all days off for our officers. And with the addition of the mutual aid that we received from the state, which was at the beginning over 200 officers, and that waned down to about 50 by the time we concluded the mutual aid this past weekend. That enabled us to put a lot more patrols in the financial district as well as other parts of the city. During the heat of the unrest, we believe that the financial district might be subject to looting and vandalism and property damage. And the protesters actually did go to the financial district and attempted to do just that, but we had enough officers to prevent a lot of that. And the very few instances we had, we were able to get on top of right away. So the short answer is yes. Now, as we wind back and dial back some of our deployment, we will still have officers patrolling the financial district, because although we've had many, many days of peace now, it's still a volatile situation, and things can escalate in a moment's instance. So you will still see patrols in the area of the financial district.
Great, thank you. And if Alaric is still with us, one of the questions that has come up, again, I hate to keep picking on the homeless, but people are asking and commenting that they're seeing more and more needles and related paraphernalia. Are these, how is Public Works helping to keep the streets clean, not only of general garbage and refuse, but of these more dangerous items?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So in Public Works' role with regards to the needles and things like that, as our pit stop locations, there is as a needle drop location where at the pit stops where FU's needles can be and disposed of the ones that were ever set up for in the COVID response. There's not the same type of a needle drop, but I think there is also a place to and dispose of sharps, so things like needles, if you will. But really, and the needle and the collection and things like that, that is handled through our Department of Public Health. And I know that we have contracts with firms that go around and pick up and for those needles.
Great. So another question that's come in that doesn't have to do with the homelessness, and I'm not sure, I think this may go more to Mary Ellen, but also possibly to the chief, is, how do we expect the public safety power shutdown program to affect San Francisco this summer, along with any COVID-19 changes? So if we end up having brownouts or blackouts, and we're still in some sort of lockdown, what might you anticipate?
I can take a stab at that first, Chief.
Okay.
I mean, we really don't anticipate power outages in San Francisco.
Right.
I feel a lot more confident in that statement than I did a year ago. Having lived through last year and,
Sure.
Having basically the whole region out except for San Francisco, I think that we have there's a pretty robust chance of that not happening in San Francisco. How it affects us is our employees. I think that especially now that we have a large percentage of our employees are telecommuting and will be for the next year, most likely. And those folks, many of which do not live in San Francisco, you can see that there's a potential there for disruption. However, our essential workers have continued to come to work, and that would still be the expectation for folks that need to come in to provide essential services. So I think San Francisco, we're much better poised. We're much more likely to be asked for assistance than need to request it in this particular area. So that's how we're thinking about it. We also, we'll see, PG&E has done, they've had a year, they've done a lot of work on their system. They, claim to have a lot more redundancy and these kind of micro systems so that they don't have to take up such large swaths of their service area. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes this summer.
Gotcha. Another question we've had in a couple different versions is around violence and protests and gatherings. So one is, do we need to be concerned that these will come up again? And, is it possible that with the protests, there will be some unexpected waves of the virus And then consequently, if we do get bigger waves and we have to go back into lockdown, could we end up with more protests because people are getting unhappy, to say it nicely, about having potentially to go back into a lockdown situation?
You know, I'll take us.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief.
No, I was just going to say, I'll answer the part about the violence and the protest. We don't know, Bonnie. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a possibility depending on today's news or yet tomorrow's news. You know, right now, so many people are invested in the movement of changing, and police brutality needs to stop and change. So
Yeah.
another incident can spark another round of this. But I will say this, I think, you know, you learn from your experiences, and I do think our city responded well, and I think we learned there were some lessons learned in our response, our police response, as well as our city response. And some of the things that worked really well, we will take forward the next time. In terms of violence, you know, my belief is because of the curfew, emergency order and the curfew that the mayor signed and declared, it gave us a tool to get in front of the violence before it became violent. In other words, after 8 o'clock, and like I said, we were seeing this across the country where the majority of the violence and the looting occurred after dark. So for us, right when we started to see the temperament of the crowd shift right around darkness, we were prepared to declare an unlawful assembly, to start making arrests on Sunday after we had the violence Saturday night. And actually, we were able to stop the violence from happening before it actually got a chance to get off the ground. And that was extremely effective. Sunday, we did arrest upwards of 80 plus people, and that seemed to lower the temperature almost immediately. And by 10 o'clock, the streets were absolutely quiet. So I think, you know, those type of tools are still in the toolbox, at least for now. We can't predict what will happen, but I do think we're prepared, and we learned some lessons from what just happened in this past couple of weeks.
Great.
Excellent, thank you. I think we have another question, and this may be directed to Mary Ellen or anyone. Can you tell us about what San Francisco had in place relative to pandemics prior to COVID-19?
Yeah, and you know, we've been, so I started with the city in 2005 at the health department as a senior health planner. And one of the things I worked on was a pandemic plan. It was my least favorite plan that I worked on, and that still stands after this. It's, you know, it's a really complicated, obviously, situation. And so obviously we have been working on this. I think what is most challenging, and probably something that is much clearer to me, at least now, I'll just speak for myself, than it was in the actual planning, is well, two things. One is that the entire planet is affected by this. And so in most emergencies, you know, you can get mutual aid and assistance, and there's programs from the state or the feds. And really we've not had any of that because everyone's in the same boat. So that is unique. And then secondly, the challenge of social distancing and physical distancing, and the need to work closely together, and the risk that imposes on you. And, you know, I just, again, want to shout out to my colleagues, my many hundreds of city colleagues, thousands really, of city workers who have continued to serve the city and serve the people of San Francisco throughout this. Because really, you know, we told everyone, stay home, save your life, save others, stay home. It's not safe. And yet we called others to come in every single day and work. And I've been working side by side with these folks, you know, since February. And so it's amazing that, you know, people have continued to do that. But those two things, I think, are yes, we had plans, but these challenges have been just unbelievable. And I guess third, obviously, is just the economic impact is just so devastating.
Right. Oh, Shana, did you want to throw in one more question?
Yeah, I think this is probably a quick question for Chief Scott. If you know, we understand that the 10B program has been suspended temporarily. Do you have any sense for when that's coming back? And you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, it was temporarily suspended from June 1st until June 6th. And the reason for that is we recalled all officers from their days off, and the officers typically, for the most part, work 10B on their days off. So it was suspended so we could have the adequate deployment that we needed to take care of our city. But June 6th was when that was lifted.
Oh,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got just a handful of minutes left. I wanted to open it to each of our special panelists today. One, give a huge thank you for you guys taking time. You guys are super busy, really taking care of our city. So thank you. But I thought I would just one by one see if there were any last minute words of wisdom or comments that you wanted to share with our participants today. So Chief, I'll start with you.
I'll just end how I started. I just want to thank you all for the partnership, and to the partners in our city family, Alaric and Mary Ellen. We've been almost living together for these last few months. So you know, we're all in this together. So thank you all for the partnership, and thank Mary Ellen and Alaric for their great leadership.
Great, thank you. Alaric?
No, I just want to echo that as well, and also include FDR members and the other as residents of in San Francisco. I mean, these last few months have been troubling for as a number of reasons, and we are certainly looking forward to the city and starting to open up ever slowly over the next weeks and to come. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mary Ellen, anything else?
Yeah, thanks. I think I've mostly said it. I just, also want to thank you for, hearing us out and trying to we're happy to, we would like to make sure people have the information they need and not feel like they're in the dark. And so if not in this forum, you know how to reach out to us. Make sure you wear your masks, even though, and I guess I just want to reiterate, not to be the downer. And I wouldn't look like, I don't want to, I try not to think about this as a downer, but like we're going to be in this for some period of time. And we've got, even as we open up, we're going to have to, remember that we're going to be at risk for some period. I mean, we anticipate being in emergency mode for the next year. And so these little babies are super important. And I mentioned the EOC and the fact we haven't had outbreaks and we work together 12 hours a day, hundreds of people, because we do this and we maintain our social distancing. So as buildings, as you do start thinking about opening up, it is actually evidence-based that this kind of thing works, and they're not fun, but they'll save lives and allow us to get to where we want to be, sooner rather than later. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I got to jump off. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you again to our panelists, Chief Scott, Director Carroll, and Director Degrafinried. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to our moderators, Bonnie Kabrowski and Shana Eskew, and for leading our committees that helped put this on. And also a big shout out to our sponsor, Paramount Group, today for their financial assistance. And thank you all for joining us. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to let us know. We will have a recording of this posted on our website shortly. And as far as anything else, please stay well and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.